Welcome back to the LK Boutique $250,000 challenge.
This is an extremely tough final table.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you do not see that every day. The best player in the world misread his hand. He is human after all. And there is Phil Ivey, picks up ace queen, makes it 80,000.
Well, Ike's sitting there with the button. He's got a huge stack. I'm sure he wants to show a little bit of aggression here, start pushing these guys around on the bubble. As I said, no one wants to go home next. And he might use position to try and get a little frisky here.
Re-raise to 240,000.
He 3-bets Phil Ivey. 240,000. The other players get out of the way. And it's back to Phil. And he moves all in. Ike. And Ike calls. So Phil Ivey, well, he is in a commanding lead. Ike Haxton with ace-jack, Phil Ivey with ace-queen. But if Ivey gets unlucky, he could be our bubble boy.
Yeah, quite possibly. I'm surprised by the speed of Ike's call, actually. I think he might have levelled himself into it a little bit. You know, he's the old mentality that, you know, Phil knows that I know kind of thing. So Phil's opened, Isaac's 3-bet the button. Obviously, Isaac can be a little bit lighter, so Phil can shove a bit lighter, and Isaac's levelled himself into making the call.
Well, there's no help there for Ike Haxton to eliminate Phil Ivey. It's nice and safe for Phil, king 4-3. We go to the turn. It is a 9 of spades. Other players watching on. Unfortunately, probably hoping that Phil gets a bad beat here. But if he can feign the river, he survives, and that's exactly what he does. 2 of diamonds. So Phil Ivey, a much-needed double up through Ike Haxton. Action on Ike Haxton, who just took a hit from Phil Ivey.
Yeah, he's given up the commanding chip lead that he did have. So he's narrowed the gap a fair bit.
95,000.
Ike being very methodical about his amounts, make it 95,000. It's funny what the bubble will do, and Phil Ivey will make the call. So, round 2.
Let's heads up.
Ike Haxton with ace-10, Phil Ivey with a dominated ace-deuce of spades. And there's a deuce in the door, and wow, what a flop for Phil Ivey. 9-4 deuce, 2 spades.
He's not really dominated anymore after that flop. That's just about the best possible flop you can get for the ace-deuce of spades. And Isaac, the right thing would be to continue with his betting here.
Bet is 160,000.
160,000, over to Phil Ivey.
And he will not be going anywhere. It just depends how out of line he wants to get with this hand here. But given it's on the bubble, I think he might proceed with a little bit of caution.
And you're right, Grant. Caution it is. He makes the call. So we will see a turn card. It is the 5 of diamonds. That's an interesting card also.
Yeah, well, Phil adds a gut shot to go with his nut flush draw and overcard. And his pair. He's got a monster hand here.
The pot a little over $500,000. We are on the bubble. We talk about the tension, the way that changes certain plays at this time. Let's see if it has any effect during this hand.
Yeah, well, Isaac's also picked up a gut shot, so I expect him to continue with the betting here. Phil hasn't shown any real aggression yet, so I don't think Isaac can be too scared about the 5 there. In saying that, Phil's call out of the big blinds. He could literally have any 2 cards knowing Phil Ivey.
Well, Ike bets $500,000, so that's quite a big bet.
Yeah, that's a massive bet, Paul. It shows Phil that Ike's not mucking around here. What it also does, given that we're on the bubble, it really puts the pressure on Phil. If he calls here, the pot's 1.5 mil. Phil's got less than that behind. So he's going to be faced with a huge river bet, possibly an all-in. And that's got to be going through Phil's mind here. At the same time, he's got such a monster hand, it's going to be hard to let it go.
Well, the last hand, Phil Ivey doubled up through Ike Haxton. He won't want to see the chips go the other way. But it'd be hard for Phil to fold this hand.
Well, he's got so much equity, Paul. In saying that if the 3 comes and there's a 4 card straight on, it's hard to get value. So he's just hoping to hit a spade here if he continues with the hand.
Phil Ivey doesn't give much away. Hard to tell what he's thinking. Look at this. Oh, Phil Ivey, now that is a tight fold.
Yeah, that's really nitty from Phil. And it's excellent pressure from Ike.
Fabian Quoss has picked up aces.
For a second there, I
Raise
thought
to
that was
100.
Jack, and I thought, what the?
Raises to 100,000. There is Phil Ivey in shot. One of the best players in the world, if not the best player in the world.
Yeah, he's widely considered the best at this point in time. He's been around a long time, and he's won that whole time as well.
He makes the call. Round to Mike McDonald.
Six fucking falls. I just had a feeling you guys were coming.
And he gets out of the way.
No, I just, whatever.
So, 2 players to the flop. Fabian Quoss with pocket aces. We're yet to find out what Phil Ivey has. But he's up against a very big hand. The biggest kind of hand pre-flop. And that is a dangerous flop. A king 9-10 flop. 2 hearts.
It's not a great looking flop for aces, actually. Against a pre-flop caller.
Both players check. We go to the turn. It is a 6 of hearts.
Now that's an interesting card. It should make Fabian a little bit more comfortable. He has the ace of hearts, so he has the nut flush draw. After the check on the flop from Phil, Fabian probably still likes his hand, but he's going to proceed with a little bit of caution, I think.
Ivey takes a stab, curiously.
I think the best line here for Fabian is to call. I don't think raising in this spot achieves that much.
What kind of hands can Phil Ivey have here? There's so many hands that are possible, obviously, with that kind of texture, but what are you putting him on, Grant?
Well, he has a lot of pairs and straight draws on that flop. King 10-9, King Queen, King Jack.
Well, King anything at this stage because he's got the King of Clubs on the river, and if Phil Ivey has a King...
Even your Queen 10, your Jack 10, they kind of pair and straight draw. If he has a King, Fabian's in a fair amount of trouble.
Ivey's going to make a big bet here. 350,000. Oh, it'd be tough for Fabian to say no here, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, what does Phil have and what is he betting with here? He checks the flop and takes a stab on the turn. He could easily have a king. Like I said, those King, Queen, King, Jack type hands are certainly in his range. And Fabian's just got to think, well, does Phil have a king? And if he has, he's going to fold.
Really taking his time.
And that bet is excellent size too. Really looks like it's for value. Fabian might level himself into making the fold here.
He's really moving around. We haven't seen Fabian this animated. And he lets it go. So we're about to find out what Phil Ivey had. But amazingly, well, there it is. He made the correct fold. He had trips. So a very good fold by Fabian Quoss. Round to Phil Ivey. 120,000 to go. Over to Mike McDonald. He's been rather quiet. Perhaps a little bit card dead, folding. Round to Ike, who's been very active. Doesn't elect to play this time. Round to Daniel. Between Daniel and Phil, there's approximately $40 million in prize money in poker. They're 2 of the biggest names in the world over the last 20 years. Negreanu with Queen Jack of Spades.
Yeah, legitimate hand from Daniel to complete from the big blind there.
The flop, Ace 10-5. We only know Phil has a Queen of Diamonds. Action's on Phil.
It's a gut shot for Daniel. He's not going to go anywhere, that's for sure.
150k, it looks like it. And Daniel comes along for the ride. The turn, a 3 of diamonds. Daniel checks over to Phil. Fascinating to watch 2 of the biggest players in the world going head-to-head.
And Phil checking back just shows that he might have a little bit of value with his queen. He could have a Queen 10 or a Queen Jack with a straight draw, a King Queen, that type of hand.
The river, an 8 of diamonds, and it looks like Daniel's going to take a stab here. 225,000 is the bet from Daniel Negreanu. He's definitely smelt some kind of weakness from Phil Ivey.
Juicy 10 again, huh? You love the juicy 10.
Phil Ivey poking Daniel, suggesting that he might have a juicy 10.
Well, given the fact that we can't see Phil's other card, I think he's sitting here with the king-queen or the queen-jack for the busted straight draw. The fact that he checked back on the turn, took a stab on it at the flop, didn't take it down, checked back on the turn with some value with a straight draw. And if he puts Daniel on 10, I think he's going to fold.
He's asking curiously. Phil also looking a little bit skeptical of Daniel. You are literally seeing two of the best players in the world going head-to-head here.
I think it's a pretty easy call with anything queen 10 or better. So I'd imagine Phil's just got, like I said, king high or queen high here. Thinking, should I hero call with a king high? As it turns out, king high would be good.
Oh, he puts the chips back. Does that mean he's folding? He does let it go. So Phil Ivey got very, very close to calling. You could see that. Daniel smelt some weakness. We still don't know what Phil Ivey had in that hand. And there it is. He had king queen. So you were right, Grant. He almost caught him.
10. Juicy 10 when 10s are juicy.
You always have a pen in your hand. Weird. Huh? It really is strange.
Did I always have a 10?
Somehow you just have a 10.
Fabian Quoss looks down at pocket eights and is taking a long pause. Fabian hoping to go 2 steps better this year, 3rd last year in the same event. Terrific run this year.
Raise, it's 175.
175 is the amount over to Phil Ivey, who's starting to amass some chips now.
That's danger signs for the other players at the table, Paul.
Well, he'd been quiet for the first half of this final table, but Phil, widely regarded as the best player in the world, a very hard man to read. The only thing that moves generally with Phil are his eyes.
Fabian's sitting with about 20 big blinds and pocket eights. It's been 3-bet by Phil. The decision's going to be back on Fabian.
Fold.
Does he go with the hand or not? I'd be very surprised if he doesn't get it all in.
Well, Phil Ivey with king queen off suit now. The action back on Fabian, who quickly moves all in. Phil Ivey doesn't look like he likes that.
Yeah, well, a hand with the value of king queen, the fact that he's 3-bet, Fabian's got 20 bigs.
So that's the 5.
It's going to be hard to let it go. He's just got to hope that he's going to be in a flip here, not dominated by an ace-king or ace-queen type hand.
The dealer just counting out the chips to let Phil know how much it is.
Yeah.
So it's actually about 18 big blinds. I think that makes it a slightly easier call for Phil. Even though he's only got king high, as soon as he 3-bets, he's kind of committed to his hand once Fabian shoves.
Well, Phil is counting out the chips. He's not happy about it, but he makes the call, so he'll be kind of happy that he's in a flip situation. He cringed before they turned their cards over.
And Daniel wipes the sweat off the brow jokingly. But yeah, it is good news for Phil. A 4-bet all-in pot. He's managed to be in a flip with king high.
Well, can Phil Ivey now eliminate Fabian Quoss? 5-5-7 flop. Fabian could double up through Phil Ivey, but he's the all-in player. If we see a king or a queen on the turn or river, he will be out. Can he avoid him? The turn is an ace of hearts. One more card for Fabian Quoss, and he will double up through Phil Ivey.
Fabian's a big favourite. 85% here, 86%.
Can he survive the river? No, he cannot. A king of hearts drops on the river. And with that, Phil Ivey will eliminate Fabian Quoss in 5th place. He will take home $800,000. 3rd last year. Unfortunately for Fabian, he couldn't go one further. What a heartbreak on the river. The action's on Mike McDonald. Now the short stack. He moves the rest of his chips in. And a pot around about $500,000. It folds around to Daniel with pocket fives. Look at this. Mike McDonald's actually got pocket kings.
Yeah, just a few big blinds and wakes up with kings. Daniel Negreanu looks down at fives and thinks it's the stone cold nuts against a 3 big blind raise, which you know, usually it is.
He makes the call, and Phil Ivey hasn't moved other than his hand playing with his chips. You never know what Phil's thinking, but he's going to throw some chips in the middle as well.
450,000.
So he makes a raise. Back to Negreanu now. He's trying to isolate Mike McDonald.
It's actually a tough spot for Negreanu. He's got a pair. Mike's shove is for a very small amount, less than a couple of big blinds. And Phil doesn't need that strong a hand to be raising here. Daniel hasn't shown any strength just by calling Mike's shove. Phil thinks he can isolate and get Mike heads up, thinking Mike doesn't have a lot of chips. He's probably got a pretty average hand. Little does he know Mike's sitting there with kings.
They're almost contrasting styles, but they almost think the same at times. Daniel Negreanu making the call, often animates and talks about what he's thinking, whereas Phil Ivey, you get the sense, is saying almost the same thing, but not saying anything. Mike McDonald seems to be arranging a cab or something because he's looking down at perhaps his phone or something. I'm not sure what he's doing, but he seems not interested in the fact that there's a $4 million first prize. He's got pocket kings. He's in good shape, and we don't know what Phil Ivey's got.
Well, Mike's just sitting there texting his mate saying, I'm in with kings. These idiots have both called me. I'm going to triple up. Get back in the game.
Well, the flop is 8-6 deuce, so that means Mike McDonald, who is the all-in player,
That's 500,000.
is in good shape to triple up here. Phil Ivey's placed a bet to try and get Daniel out of the pot. His pocket fives wouldn't be that bad on that flop, surely.
Yeah, but it's a tough spot for Daniel, actually, because Phil's 3-bet pre-flop, and he's leading at the 8-6-2 flop.
Well, that's an interesting card too. Daniel now with a straight draw. He called the flop bet of Phil Ivey.
And to be honest, with a bet and a call on the flop there, Mike's starting to get a little bit less comfortable with the kings, especially against these two guys on a 6-7-8 board.
The river, a jack of spades.
Check.
5.
Oh my God.
Can I get ace 8?
Huh?
Just read my hand.
Yeah.
And look at that. You wouldn't see that every day. Phil Ivey declaring that he misread his hand. Daniel will take the side pot, and Mike McDonald has tripled up.
And Isaac Haxton, for some reason, finds it hilarious.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you do not see that every day. The best player in the world misread his hand. He is human after all. And Daniel Negreanu announces all in. He's moved in on Phil Ivey, and Phil Ivey's quickly called. So Daniel with ace-deuce offsuit, and Phil Ivey. We're about to find out what Phil has. He also, oh wow, he has ace-king of hearts.
That's really unlucky for Daniel. He's got 13 big blinds. It folds to him in the small. Looks down at an ace. Obviously a very strong hand in the blinds, and he's just run into a pre-flop monster from Phil Ivey. Needs a deuce.
3, 4. Lots of wheels down there.
Phil Ivey doesn't move very much at the table at the best of times, just sitting back, watching it all unfold. Daniel Negreanu is our all-in player, so he would be eliminated. He bought in for around 750,000 lazy dollars, and look at that, the flop, 10-6. Daniel grabs the lead.
We haven't seen the best hand hold up very often pre-flop. Phil needs to catch up now.
Will Daniel survive and double up the turn? A jack of spades. More outs.
Well, what a shock. The turn brings more outs.
Well, he only needs to survive the river, and he will double up through Phil Ivey.
He wants to see some paint.
And the river's a king. Unfortunately for Daniel, he is eliminated.
Look at.
Isaac Haxton sits atop of our leaderboard with a commanding lead over Phil Ivey, but he's that kind of player, Grant. He's the kind of player that can do anything.
All my money's on Phil. He's the all-time greatest. He does have a chip deficit here, but you're never going to count out Phil Ivey in any situation.
Like Haxton with the button, the action's on him. He makes a raise. You'd expect him to keep the aggression up. Phil Ivey looks like he's reading a book, but I'm sure he's thinking so many things. Haxton with 7-6 offsuit, and Ivey with 4-5 offsuit will make the call.
This could be an interesting hand. They've got each other's straight outs.
Well, they're in the same neighbourhood. Let's see whether the flop will put them together. The flop. A 5-4 deuce flop. What a flop.
Check.
Yeah, well, that's about as action-packed as we can get with these two hands. Phil with the 2 pair and Isaac with the open-ended straight draw. Perfect flop for both. And they both be sitting there very happy here.
Well, Phil checks. Action on Ike. He fires.
265.
265, almost half pot.
Yeah, it's exactly half pot size bet here. Could see a pretty big pot here. Phil's got to think, well, how do I get the maximum amount of chips off Isaac here? And I think the right play is just to call and let Isaac keep bluffing. But he's going to cut out a raise, and I'm not going to question Mr. Ivey.
650.
He announces 650,000. He's going to make the raise right here. Can't imagine Ike's going anywhere, though. Oh, wow. And Ike Haxton moves all in. And Phil Ivey calls, so they get it in at the flop. You said that the pot could escalate. It certainly did, Grant.
Yeah, certainly. I can't fault either player, to be honest. There's a couple of different ways to play this hand, but once Phil raises there and Isaac's got the overcards and the open-ended draw, it's a pretty strong hand heads up, and I'm not surprised to see the chips in.
We are 2 cards away. If Phil Ivey gets beaten in this hand by Ike Haxton, he will be eliminated. The turn is a 5, though, and Phil Ivey gets a hammerlock on the hand with a full house.
That is great.
And Isaac just hits his straight on the end just to rub it in.
And it looks like Phil Ivey has picked up ace-6 offsuit and throws some chips in the middle.
Yeah, ace high for Phil. Limps the button. A bit of pot control. Wants to keep the pot small. He does have hand that has a little bit of value. And Isaac, as we've seen already, likes to 3-bet out of position. So Phil's just wanting to keep the pot a little bit smaller.
Well, Ike with 7-8 offsuit, really taking his time. You're right, Grant. He's taken
All in.
aggression every time he's out of position. He announces all in. And Phil Ivey with a big decision.
Well, that's a big shove, but Phil with the ace high. It's very good hand heads up. Isaac shoved for around about 15 bigs.
Well, Ike Haxton counting out the chips. And Phil Ivey announces call. So this could be it.
Yeah, it's a good call from Phil. He disguised his hand with the limp. Isaac showing aggression as he has done out of the small blind out of position. And Phil Ivey's made a good call and the right call.
Well, Ike Haxton really needs some help here. The flop, a king, an ace, and a 9, and Phil Ivey strikes an ace. He is 2 cards away from taking down the title.
He needs a lot of help. Phil holding one of the blockers with the 6 to the for Isaac straight. Phil's in really good shape here.
Here comes the turn. It is a 7, so there are outs.
Yeah, he picks up trip outs and 2 pair outs here. He needs a 7 or an 8 to stay alive. Otherwise, Phil Ivey's going to win this tournament again.
Can he do it again? The best player in the world. And the river is a 3 of spades, and that does it. Phil Ivey miraculously wins the same event 2 years ago, and now he's won it again. He is the champion of the LK Boutique 250k challenge. He wins the ring, he wins the plaudits, but most of all, he wins $4 million.
Thanks for watching this video. Make sure to subscribe for more awesome poker content. And check out this video. The YouTube algorithm seems confident you'll like it.